I am a drag queen and tour guide, and I do the only queer history walking tour led by a drag queen, I'm pretty sure in the entire US South.
So if you want to react to history, if you want to say something, you can feel free to do so.
I went to school at the University of Tennessee. I was a theater major, but I gave up on that. I took a lot of history classes. I really fell in love with it when I took a queer history class. Right after school, I kind of started trying to do nonprofit things and ended up in New Orleans. After like a few years of doing that, I took a thing called the New Orleans Drag Workshop about 3 years ago. From the first performance, I really fell in love with it as an art form. Nola Drag Tours is my personal company. It's a tour that covers the history of, I like to say, queer people and loose women because there's not really a better word for it. It's essentially a sex history, but it's specifically focused on forms of nightlife in the city.
This was actually a holy space before it was Congo Square. I came here and did what was called bambula dancing, and they had drum circles. They were actually able to keep African beats alive.
I've been pretty embraced by the city. I think it's been just overwhelmingly positive from the residents.
And over here, the building is now known as the Feats Blacksmith Shop. This is the oldest gay bar in the United States. This one is founded in this era because this is when we decided to invent gay men as a culture.
I would not do this tour if it wasn't in a city like New Orleans where people have just seen so many weird things. The worst thing I'll get from someone from New Orleans is either like a positive catcall or it's not Mardi Gras anymore. It really hurt at first just to have to deal with that level of harassment I was actually getting, but then I had someone tell me, you know, that's a part of the tour. Like, when you go out there and people say stuff like that to you, that's what your life is like, and that's what people who aren't like you actually need to see. When people harass me, it just honestly makes me a lot more powerful, and it just gives what I'm saying a lot more credibility, because I'm talking about what we're facing as a community and what we faced back then. I'm a trans woman who also identifies as a drag queen. I've known for a very long time that I didn't identify with man, with he. Being trans, it's surprising, shockingly, it's hard. I feel like a woman right now. That's how I feel like people treat me too. When it comes to whether people in the queer community broader, queer and trans people accept people who are both queens and trans, I think people are complicated about it. I think drag queens make a lot of trans women really uncomfortable because a lot of the work that a lot of queens do is, I'll be honest, a little misogynistic. It's making fun of women and just making a joke about what's essentially trans identity. So I understand what would make people so uncomfortable, but it's also an art form. People are saying that drag queens are not trans people, which just in my experience isn't true. Drag people are and have always been all different backgrounds of people. Drag is performance and trans is who you are, like how you feel.
Quinn Laroux, our last performer, she does a drag tour of the French Quarter. It is amazing.
So when I shave the eyebrows off, it makes me look younger, so I don't even look born yet. I would describe myself as a conceptual comedy queen more than anything. One of the things that I pride myself on doing is tackling topics that are really important to me. From that moment on, I was like, in drag, when I'm on these tours, when I'm in these streets, if they're gonna talk about me no matter what I'm wearing, let's give them something to f***ing talk about. Performing, it's just so freeing to be able to do just literally anything from going on the street. And when I'm on stage, like everyone who's looking at me is looking at me for the right reasons. Where I shine is on stage, I think. I think it's really made me the person I am now. I was touring just like everybody else, and then people started saying, oh, there's this giant pandemic that's coming. I had to shut down the tour, of course. I shut it down as soon as I realized it was a really serious issue. The city of New Orleans was impacted by the pandemic. It hit really hard in ways that hurt a lot of us. We lost so much culture, cultural icons, and just that historical memory, especially within our local Black community. We had the pandemic, and then now we have a mass social movement here, which has been really incredible to see how much the community's really come out and support, especially Black Lives Matter. And that's been mostly what I've been doing my time, is figuring out what I can do for that side of the movement. As far as how the Black Lives Matter movement is going to affect how I do my tours, I think that it's changing the way that I'm approaching my energy in general as far as my activism. In the before times, as I like to call it, I really saw the tour as like this really vital, important activism, and it is. That's really important history work. But I also know that the work that I really need to be doing as far as how much history knowledge I have, I do need to be pushing that further if I really want it to be useful in the way that I know that it can be.
When we talk about the history of civil rights and blackness in New Orleans, a lot of people forget that we actually had a first civil rights movement here in the city, mostly led by people who were free people of color.
As far as drag, I really miss just the response from the audience. A lot of people tried to do online drag, but I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that. I'll feel comfortable getting back on stage when the world is at some level of peace. And I would love to get back on stage, but until we get rid of the pandemic, we should be keeping drag on the back burner. And same with walking tours. We shouldn't be prioritizing performance over people's lives. That time is not now.